away for so long. And they also included that we will also free ourselves from this mystical trapping in Christianity, like the virgin birth, the deity of Jesus, and his bodily resurrection. And they thought that now, armed with reason and with philosophy, that finally humanity can be able to build a glorious kingdom, a kingdom of peace and prosperity. These human ability quickly evaporates. Like in 1914, one bullet ignited the fire that led to World War I. And after World War I, we have the terror and the brutalities of World War II. And then we have the act of terrorism. And all the authorities and all the government in the world tells us that these people, the terrorists, are here to stay and we need to fight against them. So the reality of human wickedness really puts away any stressed hope on humans to build a kingdom that is peaceful and that is prosperous and that is having no problems of evil. So the questions that we need to ask ourselves today: is anyone in this entire universe worthy of defeating the wickedness and the evil of the world and to give us a kingdom of peace and a kingdom of life? And as the world is desperately searching, desperately disappointed to find that kind of person, the Bible gives us the answer. If you remember, we left Revelation chapter 4 with this beautiful picture of the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders worshiping God and saying, "Worthy is the one who sits on the throne to receive power and blessing and honor and wisdom." And as the people were looking at this wonderful scene of worship, all of a sudden everybody's eyes is fixed on the throne. And John tells us that he sees a of the throne of God. And all glorious worship suddenly stops and interrupted by the mighty voice of the angels who challenge the whole universe and saying, "Who is worthy to take the scroll, to open it, and to break its seals?" Now you may wonder, what is this all about? Now what we're going to do, we're going to use the Bible to interpret itself. So we're going to go to the Bible to help us understand what John wrote in the book of Revelation. And for that, we have to go back to the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, when the king of Israel was, before he sits on the throne of the kingdom of Israel, he used to receive the royal crown and the covenant scroll, which is the book of Deuteronomy. And then, only then, he has the right to reign. So the covenant scroll, or the book of Deuteronomy, becomes a symbol of installing the rule of the kingdom of Israel. In Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 18 to 20, we are told that the king must make a copy of the covenant scroll. He has to keep it for himself throughout his life. He needs to read it carefully, he needs to study it carefully, and he needs to obey diligently all its instructions. And then also, when the king of Israel sits on the throne, he is not just operating by himself. He is the co-ruler with the king of heaven. He is the one that represents God to the people. And he is accountable and responsible of the way he exercised his power. In Psalm 110, we read, "The Lord says to my Lord," says to the king, "Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet." So this tells us that the king of Israel in the Old Testament is the one who represents God to the people, And he is to faithfully instruct the people of God about God's law and about God's instruction. So in a way, he is the guardian and the meditator of the law of God. So having this background in mind helps us understand that what we have here in Revelation chapter 5, because the angel is actually asking the question, and he's judging everybody, who is worthy to take the scroll, to open it, and to break the seal? Meaning, who is worthy to be the ruler? So this scroll that is on the right side of the throne of God is nothing else but God's eternal covenant with his people. It is the record of the great controversy. It is the record of God's acts of salvation on behalf of all humanity. It is the prediction of what's going to happen in the great controversy and how God's going to unfold the events of the world, leading us to the end, to the New Jerusalem. And this is exactly what Karim wrote about. Also, before we go to Ellen White, in Revelation chapter 10, we see that in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he is about to sound, then the mystery of God is finished, as he announced to his servants the prophet. And you know that Daniel chapter 10 is where the angel is holding the little book. We understand from our Adventist perspective that this little book is the book of Daniel. Because in the book of Daniel, God says to Daniel, seal this book until the end. So this scroll that is found on the right side of the throne of God is nothing else but how God is going to deal with this problem, how he's going to save humanity, and how he is going to establish his kingdom. Ellen White tells us the role of the history of God's providence. She's describing the throne of God. She says this scroll is the role of the history of God's providence, the prophetic history of nations and the church. Herein was contained the divine utterance, his authority, his commandments, his laws, the whole symbolic counsel of the eternal and the history of all. Language was contained in that role, the influence of every nation, tongue, and people from the beginning of the earth, history to its close. So in short, the scroll that John sees at the right side of the throne of God, is nothing else but God's eternal covenant and with his people. But John does not only see the scroll, he sees that this scroll is sealed, and it's sealed with 7 seals. And we know that in the Bible, number 7 is the number of perfection, meaning that this is sealed perfect. And again, we have to go back to the Old Testament to understand what does John mean when he sees that this covenant, God's eternal covenant, is sealed. Now, when we go back to the Old Testament and we review the history of the kings of Israel, we will quickly realize that the kings of Israel did not live up and did not obey God's covenant. Actually, only few kings really obeyed God properly. And because of the disobedience of the people and the unwillingness of the kings to obey God and follow his instruction, the prophets declare that the covenant law of God will be sealed. Isaiah tells us, bind up means seal the testimony, bind up the testimony, seal the law among my disciples. Why? Because the people of God in the Old Testament, they were unwilling to obey God and to follow his instruction. Also, when we go to the book of Daniel, Daniel tells us that God's revelation will be sealed for a period of time because of God's unfaithfulness and because of because of people's unfaithfulness, and because of people's unwillingness to follow and to obey the commandments of God. That's what Daniel tells us. Daniel 12:4 says, "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase." So here we say that this scroll at the right hand of the throne of God was sealed because of the unfaithfulness and disobedience of the people. And now, the angel stands, and with a loud and mighty voice, he shouts and he says, "Who is worthy?" Meaning, who is worthy to rule the world, to sit at the right hand of the throne of God, which is the highest honor. So it doesn't say who is willing. Hitler was willing. Napoleon was willing. Charlemagne was willing. Any person is willing to take power. Actually, people say, "Yes, I want power. Give me a chance, and I will see what I can do." But the angel is not asking who is willing. The angel is challenging the entire universe, and he's saying, "Who is worthy?" And the word "worthy" is the key word in the book in Revelation 5. And this word "worthy" in the Greek means that someone has a unique qualification to hold the highest office in the government. And basically, this unique qualification comes because of certain skills or bravery that this person has exercised specifically in war. And because of these skills and this bravery, he has won battles. So, who is worthy is the call for unique qualification. And isn't it interesting? We left Revelation 4 with the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders saying, "You are worthy." They say that the one who's sitting on the throne, God the Father, is worthy. But fascinating, God the Father does not stand up and say, "I'm worthy." That tells me that being God is not enough to be worthy and to be a candidate for the score. And the beings all around the universe are declining this challenge, declining this call, and hope faithfully. And that's why when this challenge was met with silence, John starts weeping bitterly. And he must be, wondering in his mind, is God going to lose the war? Is God a weak being in this great cosmic conflict? Because John knows if the scroll is not open, that the beginning of the end will not happen. That there will be no hope. There will be no future for God's people. That's why he's weeping, and he does not stop weeping until one of the elders comes and touches him, and he tells him, "Do not weep. Behold, the Lion that is from the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has overcome, so as to open the book and its 7 seals." Now, in the Old Testament, we realize that the hope of the Jewish nation after the fall of the Davidic kingdom, it was directed to the one who will come in the line of David, in the lineage of David, who is the Messiah of the Christ. And the whole of Israel was expecting that this Messiah will come, who is the true and ideal king, and that this king who will be the one who will instruct faithfully God's people about God's instructions, about God's law, about God's will. And we know from the Old Testament that when this Messiah comes, then the promise of God will be fulfilled. We go to the book of Ezekiel, and Ezekiel says, my servant David, was speaking about Jesus, who will be king over them, and they will all have one shepherd, and they will walk in my ordinances and keep my statutes and observe them. And when we come to the New Testament, we know that everything that was prophesied in the Old Testament about the Messiah, about the Christ that was come, was fulfilled in Jesus. So based on this Old Testament background, John tells us, yes, there is someone who is worthy, and this is the one that is coming from he is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He is the root of David, and he is worthy to take the scroll, open it, and break its seals. And the New Testament clearly tells us that Jesus is the fulfillment